This is In the Market with Janet Parshall. Let me give you our phone number, friends, and invite you to join in at any time with your comments, your questions. 1-877-548-3675, 1-877-548-3675. Didn't we love our conversation recently with Dr. Stephen Meyer on his book, Darwin's Doubt? Fabulous book. It really says, you know what, you got to look at the Cambrian explosion. Okay, any questions? And this book has been, I think, reviewed by several other peers in Stephen's world. And you know what? It's causing quite a bit of chatter. But that's not stopping some people from practicing a kind of new Salem witch hunt. Before I get ahead of myself, I want Dr. Stephen Meyer himself to join us and walk us through the situation at Ball State. What in the world? Dr. Meyer, by the way, is director of Discovery Institute Center for Science and Culture and a founder both of the Intelligent Design Movement and of the Center for Science and Culture's Intelligent Design primary intellectual and scientific headquarters in Washington State. So we're very, very pleased and very proud to have him with us. So, Stephen, you know, really, we've had this discussion. Unfortunately, just plug out the name of the individual we're about to talk about, plug in a myriad of other names. And apparently this is legitimate in the area of academia. Either believe the way I do, or I will simply drum you out of academia. What happened at Ball State?
Well, right, and let's all do it in the name of academic freedom while
yes.
we're at it.
Yes,
there's a professor at Ball State named Eric Hedin, a very fine young physics professor, physicist and astronomer, who taught a course called The Boundaries of Science, in which he was investigating the philosophical issues that arise because of scientific investigation, in particular issues about the nature, the definition, and the limits of science. Is there something beyond the natural world, and what does science have to say about that? In this course, he had a syllabus, and in the syllabus he had some supplementary reading that discussed both the theory of intelligent design from a critical point of view and the theory of intelligent design from an affirmative point of view. In other words, he allowed students to know about books that were discussing the pros and cons of the theory of intelligent design. The students have given pretty uniformly positive reviews of the class, but an external group called the Freedom from Religion Foundation decided to try to make an example of Professor Hedin. They pressured the university, claimed that he was teaching creationism, was trying to bring God into the science classroom, and then the university caved to this pressure, established an external review committee, which unfortunately includes a number of people that are prominently affiliated with a group called the National Center for Science Education, which is the leading Darwin-only science education lobby in the country. So it's a bit like the fox minding the
yes.
hen house in this case.
Mm-hmm.
And since then there have been further developments. The Astronomy and Physics Department, which is an open-minded department in the university, has hired another professor, Guillermo Gonzalez, a well-known advocate of intelligent design. This proved too much for the administration, given the external pressure they were being subjected to. And the president of the university recently issued a statement prohibiting any professor in the science division of the university from discussing the theory of intelligent design, and in the same statement affirmed the principle of academic freedom, which is oddly Orwellian, because the principle of academic freedom guarantees the freedom for professors to challenge the consensus view. The president of the university, Joanne Gora, said that the theory of intelligent design couldn't be discussed in the classroom because it was at variance with the consensus. So you apparently now have the freedom at Ball State and many other universities to question any idea you like, as long as, or to discuss any idea you like, as long as it reinforces the consensus.
Wow. Stephen, you've said so much. Okay, first of all, let me just stop for 1 second and say time out, because I'm thinking of Thomas Aquinas. Thank you very much for starting to splinter the world of the natural from the supernatural. And then I bow my head and I look at the existentialists and say, thank you even more for saying that somehow if it can't be definitively proven, therefore it must categorically fall into the spiritual as opposed to the scientific. Now, with that as a backdrop, I find it interesting because no one can actually prove evolution. And I don't want this to be too rudimentary, but we were talking about theories here. an exploration in education should be about examining theories. And what this Professor Hedin did so beautifully was arguments for and against intelligent design, which presupposes that the student is going to decide on which side of the scales the evidence is going to come down. But examination is the mandate of education. When you raise the standard of the variance of the consensus, I become even more concerned because I wonder if we'd ever realize that if you don't wash your hands before you do surgery, there are these little things you can't see called bacteria that could make a patient sick and die. That was markedly in variance with the consensus at the time that discovery was made. What a ludicrous standard for scientists.
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's why it's so fun to talk to you with all your philosophical background, Janet, because in this case, it's doubly benighted to put this kind of a speech code on scientists, because science advances as scientists argue about how to interpret the evidence. And one of the things I show in Darwin's Doubt, and you've been very gracious to have me on to talk about the book separately, but in the book I show that there's a special method of scientific reasoning that scientists use when they're investigating the remote past. And that method has sometimes called the method of inference to the best explanation. And Darwin used this method in the Origin of Species. It's the method that I and other advocates of intelligent design use to make our case. But the point here that's relevant is that any time a scientist is trying to investigate these historical questions, they have to weigh these competing hypotheses, which means that you have to be able to argue and to question the competing hypotheses. And so what Professor Hedin did was actually model the way science works. And any speech code that prevents us scientists from looking at an alternative hypothesis necessarily impoverishes the discourse, the investigation. If you say, well, it's like Henry Ford, you can have any car so long as it's black. You can have any hypothesis so long as it's a Darwinian hypothesis. Mm-hmm. That's not the way you do science. You have to be able to look at the competitors, or else when you claim that you've got the best explanation, your claim is empty. So that not only are they shutting down speech and violating this professor and other professors' academic freedom, the president of the college is actually preventing scientists from learning how science works. Scientists must have this freedom to weigh these competing hypotheses.
Absolutely. Oh, Stephen, I'm so glad I have you for another segment. This case is absolutely maddening, and it really and truly, I think, calls into account a myriad of topics which are so very important for us as people who want to think critically, and if I can be so bold to this audience, think biblically as well. I've posted again Darwin's Doubt. Absolutely fabulous book. I've hot linked to Stephen's website, but the book Darwin's Doubt is there on the right-hand side. Check it out in the market with janetparshall.org. I so enjoy our conversations with Dr. Stephen Meyer. He really does make us think, and he is such an eloquent defender of real critical thinking, particularly when it comes to the idea of intelligent design. So he is considered one of the founders of this movement, and he is very instrumental to the work being done at the Discovery Institute Center for Science and Culture. A superb author. His latest is called Darwin's Doubt, The Explosive, that word is important, you have to read the book to learn more, The Explosive Origin of Animal Life and the Case for Intelligent Design. But Dr. Meyer joins us today because of this unconscionable action taken by Ball State University, which basically says all are welcome as long as you think the same way we do. But here in the halls of our academia, you have to think a certain way. You're not allowed to think any other way. So, Stephen, it raises a myriad of questions, not the least of which is, academia is not unlike the military. You buck the system, they'll show you the door. So what is this man going to do? He already has his PhD. He's an assistant professor, as you noted, of physics and astronomy. He could try to go back and go after them for the squelching of his academic freedom, despite the protestations of the president of Ball State. Or he could consider himself some kind of a martyr for intelligent design. He doesn't want to do that. He just wants his students to think. So what's he going to do?
Well, I really don't know what the outcome of this case will be. His course is being evaluated by this independent or this committee that's been appointed, and I think the outcome for him personally is somewhat up in the air. I don't think his job is necessarily in question, but it may affect his ability to get tenure down the line.
Yes.
And now a second ID proponent, the prominent Professor Guillermo Gonzalez, has been hired at Ball State, and he was hired as all this was unfolding, and so he came pre-tenure as well, just a couple of years before facing that decision, and he may have difficulties because of the climate there that now has come from the very top of the university. So, I don't know if the good citizens of Indiana may rise up and let their voices be heard, because all of these institutions are, in the end, taxpayer-supported institutions. But I think what the situations like this underscore is the extent to which the university system is in the grip of a dominant thought form, a worldview, and we call that worldview materialism or scientific materialism. Every worldview has to answer some basic questions, one of which is, what is the thing or the entity or the process from which everything else comes? And this is one of the most profound questions that any human can ask. It's been asked by thinkers all the way back to the Greeks, and there's been two basic answers to that question. One is the matter-first view that says that matter is eternal, self-organizing, self-creating, and therefore that the complex forms of life we see around us are the product of an unguided, undirected material process. The other view is the mind-first view that sees the need for a purposive intelligence or a creator of some kind to shape the matter, to create and shape the matter that we see in the physical world. And there were Greek philosophers who represented that school of thought. So this is a perennial philosophical and scientific discussion. And for a university to shut that down by essentially saying you can only take one side of that is really, again, Orwellian. It's very strange. And yet, to those of us who have been in the university setting, and to professors like Hedin and Gonzalez, who've been at, Gonzalez now, this is his third university. He was deprived tenure at Iowa State after having an absolutely stellar publication record over this same issue. But I think, for professors who are working on there's so much evidence of design now, to not be able to talk about it is really just doing violence to the whole mission of the university, which is to seek the truth and to have the freedom to talk about it.
Absolutely. Evolution theory, intelligent design theory, they both fall into that same camp. You could say that the scales tip in one direction over the other for the preponderance of evidence. There are all kinds of gaps and holes. Your eloquent writing speaks to this with such clarity. So the concern then becomes that we're not going to be allowed to address this particular area of theoretical thought because, and I'm holding in front of me a piece from Inside Higher Ed, because, the author purports, the university seems to clearly understand the issues and agree with the positions enumerated in our letters, including intelligent design is not science. It is a religious belief. Ah, said Shakespeare, there's the rub. Intelligent design has no place in a science classroom. Intelligent design might be discussed in humanities or social science curriculum, but only if it is done in an objective matter, and academic freedom cannot be used as a shield to teach theories that have been rejected by the discipline under which a science course is taught. That last statement in particular is resoundingly paradoxical. But my question then becomes this. If you cannot produce macroevolutionary evidence, if you have questions brought forth by the Cambrian explosion, if you know that you're going to have to say that, yes, there are all kinds of questions here that even ardent subscribers to Darwinism cannot fully answer, why the animus against intelligent design?
Well, notice, Janet, the way the definition of science is being used to shut down a thought in that statement that you just read. The claim is that intelligent design is not science. The claim is not. They're not claiming that intelligent design is false or the evidence is against it. They're claiming it doesn't meet some arbitrary definition of science. And one of the things I do in Darwin's Doubt is show that there's every reason to regard the theory of intelligent design as scientific. First of all, whether the design argument is being made in the area of physics and astronomy or whether it's being made in biology, as I do in my work, the argument is based on evidence. It's based on the evidence of the fine-tuning of the laws and constants of physics, the fine-tuning of the planetary system, evidence of the massive infusions of information that we see in the history of life in events like the Cambrian explosion, but it's also based on a standard method of scientific reasoning, in fact, the very one that Darwin used. So that's the ruse. And by trying to define intelligent design out of science, then you can justify this suppression of discussion.
Absolutely. Last point, particularly brilliant. Wow. Friends, I recommend heartily Darwin's Doubt. Read it for yourself. Become engaged in this conversation. The fact that it's so intense means it's that important. My thanks to Dr. Stephen Meyer. We'll be right back.